Welcome to the next week of the Room with 21 podcast, where we talk about college football and Oregon football in particular. For this week, we have a handful of topics to go over. The first one is three Oregon key position groups to watch out for, three Oregon breakout players, three Oregon developmental players that might play a factor this year, and then we'll end with some preseason Heisman odds. So to get started, we'll talk about three Oregon position groups that we want to talk about. The first position group that I think is really going to be a factor this year is obviously the quarterback room. So on the quarterback room, we obviously have Dante Moore as the returning guy. He's not only the quarterback, he's the guy. And like we talked about last week, he has a lot to prove, even though he put up great numbers and had a successful season. The next step in his career progression is winning those big games, right? He did against Penn State and a couple other ones that I think he played decently. But on the big stage against Indiana, he struggled, right? And so how does he rebound from that? Does he learn from his decision making? Does he take care of the ball better? That's going to be key. But there's no question that QB1 is Dante. So that's not in question. And then so number two is really the question, right? So we have Dylan Raiola who came over from Nebraska. And just like Dante, highly touted coming out of high school, five-star guy, all the offers you can expect, everything on the table for him coming into Nebraska, especially because Nebraska is historically a great program, but is struggled the last couple decades here, and really looking to rebuild. He went into that situation with the pro and the con of knowing he was the guy. And even though he had talents, that was never in question. His time with Nebraska did not end particularly well. And, you probably have seen some of the comments he made about the difference between Oregon and Nebraska as far as talent level, and also, the scenery that's different between Nebraska and Oregon. I saw a lot of comments from Nebraska fans that were not too excited about his comments. And I don't think his comments were particularly bad or untrue, but it definitely does not feel good as a Nebraska fan to read the comments that he made, right? And so the question with Dylan is he's kind of, um, this guy who had everything at his fingertips, but knows he has some area to grow, knows that there's another level that he can get to. So, like Dante, he has moved over to Oregon. The timing, is kind of a question of, and we'll probably never know, did he come over before he knew Dante was coming back or after? We'll never know. But the end result is that he's accepted the fact that this is Dante's team, and he wants to spend the year learning and trying to compete for that number two, and hopefully, for his sake, competing for that first spot the following year, right? So that's where Dylan is coming in. And it's my understanding from reading what Nebraska fans have complained about him is he is not the quickest guy, and he's kind of statuesque, kind of like a Big Ben from the Steelers, but obviously not as tall. And so where he's really strong is his arm talent. And so if he can develop and take that arm talent, get to know the offense, hone in his decision making, and get the ball out quicker, then it can really, uh, compensate for the fact that he's not the most athletic guy when it comes to running. And so I really want to see that part of his game develop. I want to see his leadership develop. I don't think he's a bad kid at all. But I definitely remember watching him at Nebraska and thinking, man, does he like just happen to look like Mahomes? Or like is this like it was kind of weird to me to watch him not only have Mahomes' number, but his haircut, his mannerisms, like it was a little too close. And it's totally okay to have players that you want to emulate. I think that's normal that you have players you look up to and you want to try to learn from. But that was a little too close for comfort for me, where when he came over to Oregon, I was like, okay, does this kid have an identity issue? Does he know who he really is? And I think that's going to be the challenge for Dylan, where he's no longer going to have that pressure, which is going to be an opportunity for him to figure out who is Dylan. You know what I mean? And can he take his natural born talent and learn from really good people and coaches around him and get himself into a position where he's a high level draft pick, right? So I think Oregon has done a really good job over the last few years as being known as a place that you can come at that quarterback position and get developed and turn into a high draft pick, right? So everything is on the table for Dylan. He has the talent. It's just going to be a matter of how does he adjust to the culture? How does he take accountability? How does he learn and grow? How does he figure out who he is? If he can do that, the natural talent is there and he can take off, but that's going to be up to him. Then in competition with Dylan, we have Brock Thomas. And so Brock Thomas is kind of a really interesting story. He's a local kid who kind of walked on and is a hell of an athlete. And when there were questions about Dante's health last year, there were also questions about who was the number two last year, and everyone thought it was going to be Austin Ostad, who had been waiting for a couple of years for his turn, and then all the fan base was very surprised when Brock Thomas was the first guy off the bench. And I won't lie, I was also very surprised, but I was there during that rain game where Dante was a little banged up, and here comes Brock Thomas. And granted, it was literally a monsoon because I was soaked. It was coming sideways, and you could look over the edge of the field and you could see visibly the rain getting pushed by the wind. So it wasn't like anybody was really going to light up the scoreboard throwing the ball, but he made a couple really good throws. And what I appreciated about Brock was he knew the offense. There was no hesitation in his decision making. He read the defense pretty well and he was decisive, right? So when you have somebody like Brock who's been in the offense for a minute, that can be a contender with Dylan, who has more natural talent in some ways, but it's new to the offense, right? And then Brock is kind of a sneaky, uh, like runner. He's more athletic than people realize, so that's an advantage he has over Dylan as well. So the real key is, now that they've gotten away with the redshirt freshman rule and they put aside the, oh, well, if you play more than 4 games in the season, then you can't redshirt, like all that's gone. And now we have the quote unquote 5 for 5 rule going forward. Which really means you have 5 years to play 5 years. So what that means is when you start looking behind those top three, there's going to be wide open competition, right? And from what we're hearing from camp, Achilles Smith Jr. seems to be that guy that's coming to the cream rising to the top is Achilles Smith. And so Achilles Smith is somebody that I think all Duck fans have a soft spot for, right? We all loved his father, Achilles Smith, now senior. And we all know that one year, if he doesn't get injured, we make a run at that championship that year. Like he was just dynamic. right? And it was unfortunate to see Achilles Sr., go to a team that did not help him develop in the NFL, and he kind of crashed early in his career. But that's going to happen with quarterback. Quarterback is such a dicey position that you might be a good player in college, but if you go to the wrong team without the right support or without the right coaching, it can really damage you pretty quickly, right? So that's unfortunately what happened to him. But his son, when I've seen him play in like the spring games and stuff, it's like looking at a clone of Achilles Senior as far as like body type. Like he might not be as like muscular as his dad, but he's definitely still young, so he has room to like fill out. But he's definitely tall, has the same stature. He runs kind of the same. And so really with Achilles, he had natural athletic ability. um, he moves extremely well. So really for him, the development is, can he develop in the passing game? Can he get better at reading the defense, get better at managing the offense, get better at that part? Because the natural athletic part is just there already, right? But from what people have been saying about the fall camp, is he's starting to piece that together. He's taking a lot of time and trying to learn the offense in a different way. And if he can continue that development and pair that with his natural athletic ability, then I think he can sneak in for some reps here this year, especially with a couple of the games where they'll probably be uh, up pretty early, right? So I really want to see that group develop behind Dante, see, you know, who's playing more when it comes to the second spot, see who comes in that third spot and fourth spot. Um, because with the transfer portal era, you know what I mean? The people you have in your quarterback room are here today and gone tomorrow a lot of the time, right? So knowing who you have behind Dante is an insurance policy when it comes to, insurance policy against like injuries, but it's also about development for the future years, right? So it's going to be a really interesting room. I think it's a deep quarterback room, deeper than Oregon has had in a few years. Um, but it's also going to be very interesting. So the second group I really want to talk about is the linebacking room. Okay. So last year, the Oregon defense was pretty strong up front, really strong on the back end. The linebacker was pretty uh thin, like really top heavy, really good talent at the starter spot, but not much developing behind it. Um, it seems to be still a little thin. They didn't really go out and get anybody in the transfer portal, but I think the linebacking room is a room that feels more comfortable with development. So this year, we lose Bryce Betcher, who was literally the captain of the defense. He was a through and through duck, all of that, right? So that's a big set of shoes to fill, right? And so the projected starters at linebacker right now are Jerry Mixon and Devin Jackson. It's not surprising. I feel like those two were going to be fine, right? I feel like they played most of last year. It was really Jerry, Devin, and Betcher that were kind of the three that were fitting into those two spots, depending on the game and the health of those three available, right? So I feel very comfortable with Jerry and Devin. I think Jerry seems to be the more the more disciplined one, and Devin's a little bit more the battering ram guy. But having played linebacker, I think that if you compare the disciplined linebacker with the more wild card linebacker, that tends to really work well because they complement each other. So I think that will be great. I think they'll be just fine. Then it's more of a battle of, okay, who develops behind them, right? Not only for the depth for this year, not only for the insurance um, against injury, but also because um, you know, it's a long season, right? Now, if you're going to make a playoff run, you're talking like 13, 14, 15, 16 games that, it gets to the point where you need everybody. So at some point, all these people are going to play a lot. And then you also want to figure out who are the pieces you want to move forward with the next year. Um, and so Gavin Nix and Dylan Williams seem to be the guys slated to kind of mix in behind Sherry. Um, so I want to see really who, like, of the two can step into a mini leadership role, right? Like, Jerry's going to be that leader on the field, but when he comes off, who can kind of fill in those shoes, right? Then behind Devin, you have Gavin, Nixon is here, Wyatt, or it could be a little in the mix. Nasir's usually kind of an outside guy that kind of comes off the edge on third down a lot, but a way to get him on the field more would be to kind of get him into that linebacker spot behind Devin. Um, I think that Nasir is going to be of somebody you can't keep off the field. So I could see Nasir playing multiple spots this year just to get him on the field. So again, those are kind of the guys. Like they had an injury to Braden Platt. Um, that kind of hurts the depth that already was pretty thin. So where I feel the top of the linebacking group is pretty solid, we're gonna have to see who of the younger guys kind of steps up. And the good thing for them is they're gonna have an opportunity to do it, right? Like if they go in and earn the trust of that coaching staff, they're gonna set themselves up well for the future. All right, so the third group we want to talk about is the offensive line, right? So the last couple of years, the offensive line has been a finalist for the many awards and lots many draft picks to the NFL. And so there's a real question about who's going to fit where in what position, how is depth going to look. I think this year the depth is actually going to be pretty solid, but it's going to be a matter of putting the pieces into the right places. So I kind of feel like the first few games, since we're playing teams that might not be as competitive this year, that is going to give an opportunity for the coaching staff to really put out different variations and figure out who works well where and who works well together. So at left tackle, I think Fox Crater did a lot when he stepped in at the end of last year when they had some injuries to earn a lot of respect. I think Zaire Addison, Janorius Wilson, um, both of those players are going to be great depth pieces that can earn more reps as they go. Um, but I think Fox has kind of locked that spot down at this point. But I'm sure they're going to probably move people in and out a lot early. At left guard, you have Quico Rogers, who I think is also an established guy. I think he is a guy that can play different spots. So depending on where they put other people, he can move a little bit. But I think left guard is a good spot for him. Behind him, you have Douglas Utu, Trent Ferguson. They'll be in the rotation. Um, I think that Utu's a guy that I really think could make a push this year. Um, and I wouldn't be surprised if he takes some of those reps early in the year. And center, you still have Poncho returning. Man, I think you can't speak enough about Poncho. Like he is the glue of that offense. He's so experienced, so calming. He was banged up at the end of last year a bit, and I think that harmed some of his production down the stretch. But I think when he's healthy, there's not a better center out there. And for people that understand football, like center is extremely important. If you don't have a decent center, then the offense doesn't run. So his health is very important. But we also need to figure out depth behind him because it's a long season and we need to make sure that there are other guys that can step in, or if you need to move pieces around, that people can play different positions. Dave Iuli is an experienced guy that should be in the mix. Devin Brooks and Bryce Bolton. Um, and I think that you have options there, and I'm sure that the staff will try a few guys out there to see who that next guy will be. At right guard, though, Dave Iuli, again, because we're talking about moving pieces, he might end up being like the backup center or maybe the third guy at center, but probably most likely he'll start at guard. And then they'll probably rotate other people that we talked about before behind him. I think Michael Bennett is a guy to look out for that can make some impact there. Then we have at right tackle, uh, Tommy Tufi. Um, Even though he's a freshman, that man is a mountain. And I think if you, especially in the run game, run behind a guy that big, I think you're going to be happy. Um, you also have a couple other younger guys behind there, Michael Bennett that can rotate in. So really, the offensive line is kind of a healthy mix of experienced guys, a couple transfers, and a couple of really young, talented guys. So the key is going to be who plays where, how do the puzzle pieces come together? But the offensive line is going to be extremely important. I mean, it is on any team, but extremely important when you get into the playoffs and you're playing those really good defenses. We saw what happened when that offensive line held up and when it did not hold up very well, right? So that's going to be a really key area to watch for Oregon. So those are the position groups I think are going to be extremely significant for the 2026 season. Our next topic is going into three Oregon breakthrough players for 2026. These are guys that we think kind of established themselves a little bit last year or previously, but I think are going to take off this year. So the first one is Jordan Davison at running back. Zaire Hill also made a splash last year with his speed and explosiveness. I think Davison is going to be um, the workhorse back. He's strong. He has really good vision. Um, and I think he's very dependable. And I think if you pair him with Zaire Hill, that's going to be a great 1-2 punch. And then they also have so much depth at that running back room. Um, which is really important as we found out last year in the playoffs, and they went through all of their running back depth with due to injury and had to try to find linebackers to convert for the game. So I think we're sat pretty good there, but I think Davison is the guy that showed the consistency that I think now that he's not going to have to share as many reps as running back, and he's moved from like that running back two spot to the running back one spot. I think he's going to take off. Now, the interesting thing is probably some of these early games, if they get out ahead a lot, his numbers might be a little deceptive. And the same thing happened with Dante early in the season, where Dante was only playing like a half basically, and then coming out. So his numbers look good, but not great because he's only playing a half compared to some of the other competition that was having to play entire games. So the same thing might happen a little bit to Davison early because they're going to be trying to really establish a hierarchy and position groups and who should be in what personnel group for what situation. That's going to happen. So I expect him to get a lot of reps, but also probably late in games, watch other guys get reps too. But I think when you start getting into the meat of the schedule and you're starting to get into those quote unquote old school Big Ten games where you got to run between the tackles, I think Davison is that guy. Then the second guy I think that's going to have a breakthrough is Evan Stewart. So Evan Stewart was already an NFL guy before he got injured going into last year. And his injury ended up being pretty significant, where they kept thinking he was coming back. And then he was starting to practice a little bit, but he never quite turned the corner enough to play. So now he comes back this year. And when I saw him in the spring game, I was like, yeah, he looks healthy. And when he's healthy, he stretches the field that opens everything up underneath, right? He's a field stretcher guy. He's a deep ball guy. And when Oregon beat Ohio State, a couple of years ago at home, he was a big reason why, because he was able to prove that he was a threat downfield, which made Ohio State kind of have to adjust and then open up the middle and underneath stuff more. So I think because Evan Stewart is going to have a big year, that it will also have downstream impact on the other receivers, where they're going to be open more because he's going to start taking a lot of eyeballs to him. And I do think in the red zone, he might be a guy with his size that we can get the ball to as well. So I think he's going to come back. He did in the spring game. And I think that's going to continue, where he's going to come back just hitting the ground running. The third guy I think that's going to have a breakout season is Koi Parrish. He comes over from Minnesota from at the safety spot. Um, and I really think, Dylan Thieneman did a tremendous job for Oregon last year, especially in key moments. He was the type of player that, they say like big time players make big time plays in big time games. That was Dylan Thieneman, right? So can Koi come in and be that guy? He's a little bit of a different style than Dylan, but I think he's a little more like rangier than Dylan. I think Dylan was more the guy that you could bring up and he could like be a thumper occasionally in the box, and he was a decent ball hawk occasionally. Um, but I think Koi covers more ground, and so I'm curious to see how they adjust the usage of this position, because with Dylan, they kind of brought him up a lot. Do they do that with Coy as well? Or do they keep him more of like a traditional safety? Either way, I think it's good for Oregon, because the corner spots are so young and talented that having experienced safety behind them um, is going to make that secondary just as good as it was last year, if not better. So I think those three guys are going to be having breakthrough roles. And then I have three developmental guys, excuse me, that I think need a little bit more polishing, but I think could go from a developmental guy into a breakthrough guy either this year, or they'll be setting themselves up for a breakthrough the following year. So the three guys I really think Dylan Rayola again. Um, if he takes it seriously this year and he learns from the coaching staff and he learns from Dante, and he's like, okay, great, I'm going to take this opportunity to learn the offense, become a better leader, know who I am identity wise, then that developmental part of him will pay off dividends probably sometimes during this year, but then also for next year. Because if he comes in strong this year and he's showing um, those changes, then he sets himself up for the 2027 season as the guy that's coming back to run this team. So I think he has the capability to do it. It's just a matter of does he, right? So again, all things we're hearing is he's doing the right things. He's learning the offense. He's working on his body and stuff like that. So it's just a matter of does he execute it on the field? So time will tell with that. The second guy I'm really excited about is Jalen Lott. Okay, so freshman receiver. And again, since we don't have the red shirt thing going on anymore, and we don't have to worry about playing in more than 4 games, I can see this kid getting a lot of action early, especially in the games that Oregon runs away with because he is. I saw him play uh, in uh, in the Polynesian Bowl, the high school bowl, which is basically like an all-star game. And I think he has the potential to be an NFL possession like receiver, right? Like he just is a very great route running, good hands, good nose for the ball. Like he does like the little things well, and he's also very quick. So I could see him, really kind of becoming the next Corey Moore behind him and kind of being that slot guy that you might move around a little bit, but you really just kind of need to get him the ball in space, and then he can create after he gets the ball. So I think he can be an explosive weapon even this year, but whatever he does this year is going to be gravy essentially, because this year, if he whatever he does to develop, I think the following year he'll start to take off with whatever he learned. The third guy that I think is going to be a developmental guy is Kendra Harrison, the tight end that's also a freshman, who is ginormous. This kid is huge and very tall. Um, he probably needs to fill out a little bit more, but like I think he'll naturally do that. Kids naturally do that when they get into a college football program, and then also just biologically you tend to fill out a little bit when you get into college naturally anyway. And so I think as he starts to fill out, he's going to naturally become like a better blocker. He already is a really good receiver. And I could see him being the next tight end in line. And I think Oregon's starting to develop like a tight end pipeline of just freak athletes at that tight end position. And I think man, you get into the red zone and you just need to dump the ball over the top of somebody, that man could be the guy to do that. So I could see him coming in, in like a third and goal situation and just say, just fucking get the ball. Like just stand there and you're tall enough and athletic enough that you just dump the ball over the top of that guy. So I think he is another guy that will take a year this year. He'll come in, he'll contribute right away, but then whatever he does this year, he'll take off the following year. So those are three guys that I think will be the developmental group that I'm going to be looking at. Our final topic for today is preseason Heisman odds. So we know that this is early. This is what we do um as fans and followers of college football is we make these odds and we make the preseason rankings like as early as we can. The appetite for college football content is just it's just incredible, right? So no surprising this is early. So the current odds that just came out a couple of days ago, the lead favorite is CJ Carr from Notre Dame. There's a tie between him, the quarterback of Notre Dame, and Arch Manning, a Texas quarterback at Texas, plus 750. In second place odds, you have Trinidad Chambers from Ole Miss at plus 900. Fourth is Dante Moore, Oregon quarterback. Then you have Julian Sand, who's also tied with the quarterback from Miami, Jerry Vince. Then you have Josh Hooper and Jeremiah Smith tied. Behind that, Gunnar Stockton, Sam Levitt, John Meteor from Oklahoma, Jaden Muyava from USC, Marcel Reed from Texas A&M, Keelan Russell from Alabama. Right, so not an atypical list. You have a lot of quarterbacks. As we know, it's typically a quarterback award with a handful of other position players in there. Really, for me, okay, so CJ Carr, I think, is going to be a solid quarterback. But my problem with Notre Dame is until they beat all the games that they should early in the season, it's really hard to think of like a Heisman run for somebody on that team. If they do what they've done the last couple of years and they lose to somebody that they should not lose to, that's a hard pill to swallow for somebody's Heisman um, possibilities, right? And their schedule this year is really weak, so that's also going to harm him, right? He might not have a lot of opportunity at that big time matchup. He probably will have some decent numbers because of that weak schedule, but is that enough at the end of the season if you don't have any big time games? So then you have Arch Manning from Texas, and last week we talked about him. I'm not sold on him. I never have been. I think he's too inconsistent, and it's not fair to him to have that Manning um, uh, pressure of having that name. But there's a pro and a con to it. Like you get the benefit because you have that last name, but then you get the pressure because you have that last name. I think he's a solid quarterback, but he's gonna have to prove it to me that he can be um more consistent. Trinidad Chambliss, I think for me is really fun to watch. Um, it's going to be a matter of he's lost some talent um on the offensive side of the ball. So can he overcome that and show growth? He had a really good year last year, but he's older. He had to fight really hard, extremely hard to get this last year of eligibility left. So people are going to have a high expectation of him that he's going to have to deliver. I think he's athletic and talented enough to do it, but it's going to be a matter of uh, the ins and outs of reading the defense um, and the ability to make good decisions that I want to see more consistently, and probably the NFL does too, because the NFL has figured out over the last few years that drafting a guy that has like one decent year, a flash in the pan year, is a pretty big risk. So if he can do it a second year in a row, his NFL stock goes whoop, really high. So he has a lot on the line, and I think he can do it. It's just a matter of doing it. Then we have Dante Moore, who I think is going to be in the race the entire year. And again, like we talked about earlier, it's going to be a matter of decision making in big time moments and taking care of the ball. If he does those two things, there's plenty of opportunity on the schedule for big time matchups. They play Ohio State, they play Michigan. They don't play Indiana this year, which seems to be his kryptonite. But there's going to be opportunity for some big time matchups, and if he performs well, like he did in the Penn State game last year, then I think he's going to be right in the race. Julian Sand for Ohio State, he's going to be in it all year too. I think the challenge with that he's going to be have plenty of opportunity. They have a decent schedule this year as far as contenders on their schedule. But the problem with saying that he's going to have is because they lost some NFL receivers and they have Jeremiah Smith left. Jeremiah Smith is going to pull a lot of the votes probably away from him, and those two will probably split a lot of votes. But I think the math would actually lean towards Jeremiah Smith over Julian Sand, right? So I think he'll be in the mix, but I don't know if he'll win it unless something crazy happens. Darius Mincer going to Miami. I think he's kind of a dark horse guy. It kind of depends on who Miami is because they're losing a lot. They're replacing a lot, but their team last year was really veteran heavy. Um, and so it kind of depends on how they adjust to that, right? Can they do it 2 years in a row? Josh Hooper with Indiana, also I think a dark horse. Very curious to see, similar to Miami, Indiana's done it a couple years in a row, but most of those guys last year, like it's been talked about, were very much elder statesmen of the college game. Most of them, most of the starters anyway, were older guys, and most of them had um, carried on from the James Madison time, followed their coach over to Indiana, and they'd been together for a while, right? So Now, can Indiana do it with kind of like the next generation? That's going to be interesting. And Jeremiah Smith, I think, is going to be a finalist. I just think he's going to, without the other, they'll still have other good receivers at Ohio State. They always do. But I think there will be more of a microscope on him, even more than there was before. And frankly, it's deserved. He's the best receiver in the country. He's probably the best player in the country, unfortunately, for Oregon fans. But he is that good. So he's going to be, I think he's going to be the guy that no matter else who is in the mix, he's going to be probably a finalist as long as he's healthy. Gunnar Stockton at Georgia, I'm not really thinking he's a factor. I don't think Georgia is going to have enough offense to produce decent numbers. They're probably still going to be a really good team and in the mix for the playoffs. Um, I just don't view Gunner as a high statistic guy or a flashy guy. And unfortunately, with the Heisman, the last couple of decades, you kind of have to be either flashy or really good statistically. I just don't think he's that guy. Sam Levitt with LSU is kind of a dark horse tier two guy. Um, I really liked him at Arizona State. John Matier from Oklahoma, I think is probably dark horse tier one. Jaded Mavia from USC, probably dark horse tier one. Marcelo Reed, um, dark horse tier two. Keelan Russell, I think that's just an ad because they just announced that he's the starting quarterback at Alabama. So I think that's just a nod to the respect people have for Alabama. I think it's really too early to have him on the list. So really, from my perspective, my personal favorites would be Trinidad, Dante, Jeremiah Smith as my top three. Then in the next level, I would have Hooper, Mensa, um, Matier, um, Jaden Leova from USC, and then behind them, I would probably go Levitt, Reed, Stockton, and then Russell. Right. So here's the thing about these rankings and these odds, it changes week to week. If somebody has a good game, they're going to shoot for rankings. If somebody has a loss that they don't look good in, they're going to drop. If there's an injury, they're going to drop. So this is going to change a cajillion times between now and the end of the season. But it does tell you kind of what the national media is looking at and how the bettors are viewing it, right? So these are the guys on paper going into the season that people view as the best players in this country. So that is going to be it um, for this episode. Starting next week, the format will change a little bit. I'll basically be going over the results of the previous week, um, and then talking about the matches going in. So going into next week, we'll be going into week zero, so to speak. And so I'll be talking more about matchups going into next week, along with a couple other topics. And then following that, it'll be more, hey, let's review what happened. Let's talk about what's coming up, and then topics in between the two of those. So thanks for joining me, and stay tuned for next week.